Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has taken to social media blasting the Trudeau government on the alleged push to legalize hardcore drugs such as fentanyl and cocaine. Now, to chat about this in more detail is Sun political columnist Brian Lilley, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, BC already walked away from their experiment of legalizing hardcore drugs. Why the push for a potential plan to go national?
Because the Trudeau Liberals just fundamentally believe in this. And when this story came out, with media outlet got a hold of the briefing book of Yara Sachs, the junior health minister in charge of mental health and addictions, and briefing book preparing her to answer questions before a House committee on March 21st, they had in there a line about national decriminalization, and that the federal government wanted to work with all municipalities and provinces and any jurisdiction that wanted to move forward on decriminalization. And of course, that was before British Columbia said, hey, you know what? This decrim thing, it's not really working out for us. Overdoses are still going up. Crime's awful. We can't even shoo the guy away who's smoking crack at a children's playground. So, that was before that. I would have thought that the Liberals would have backed off a bit. After Pierre Poilievre saw this story, started posting about it on social media, Yara Sachs, the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, said, why are you claiming these are secret documents? They're not. They're posted online. And yes, we want to work with any jurisdiction. So they don't want to back away from this. They actually want to lean in on this. They want to make this the policy going forward, that you're going to support decriminalization. And lots of Liberals are saying, wow, it's not the same as legalization. In effect, it is. What is decriminalization? It's no longer illegal, Hal, for you to have a bag of cocaine on you or for you to use it. So it is effective legalization. And the Liberals are playing word games on this.
Brian, you touched a bit on crime. Premiers across Canada once again asking the feds to consider bail reform changes. Didn't Ottawa just do that? What's driving this latest call?
So there's a couple of things. There was a horrific murder case in British Columbia where a woman was killed by someone who was out on probation and then breached their probation conditions and was released on bail for other crimes, was determined to be a 76% chance of committing another crime by the Parole Board of Canada. Everyone still let him out. The Parole Board, the judges or justices of the peace who granted bail, and then he murdered a woman. That's the allegation. Obviously, things need to be proven in court. And so this has prompted the premiers once again to write a letter saying, look, you obviously didn't fix things enough. The government brought in a very minor reform. Frank Caputo, who is the Conservative MP for Kamloops, one of their justice critics, he told me on a scale of 1 to 10, this is about a 1.5. What they brought in, that there needs to be a lot more done to fix bail. I'll give you another example. So they brought in bail reform for folks who are committing the most heinous crimes and with a gun. But we just had a big auto theft bust announced here in the Toronto area. And this is, I believe there were 18 different people arrested. One of them was out on bail at the time of arrest. I think 5 or 6 others were breach of probation as part of their charges. So they're all charged with serious offenses, and more than a third of them are breaching some kind of release condition. And guess what? They're probably going to be released again. That is the way things are working, because the Liberals put in a de facto bail as quickly as possible with the least onerous conditions.
At the beginning of the year, the Trudeau government, Brian, promised a cap on temporary foreign students. This has not yet happened, and as you and your colleagues have pointed out, the numbers continue to soar.
Yeah, so if I tell you in January, Hal, we're going to put a cap on foreign students coming in as temporary immigrants to Canada, would you think that by the end of May, we would have accepted more or less people than we accepted it from January to May the previous year? You'd probably say less. We sent out 216,000 study permits between January 1st and May 31st this year. That's 16,000 more than the previous year. That's an 8% increase. That's not insignificant, Hal. It's not like, oh, well, it went up by 1,000, but don't worry, we're going to cut it later on. You add on top of that, we've got 30,000 plus asylum seekers between January and the end of May this year. That's up from 28,000 the year before. We've got more permanent residents, which is the type of immigrants that we're supposed to be going out and seeking, not temporary foreign workers or temporary foreign students. And the asylum claims have gone through the roof compared to a decade ago. So we're bringing in an average of 109,000 people each and every month. Since December 19th, we added 760,000 people, 109,000 people a month. That outstrips job supply. That outstrips the housing supply. That outstrips the ability of provincial governments, regardless of where you are, to provide proper healthcare services, doctors, nurses, etc. So all of these things are adding up. And there have been several reports now. The Royal Bank, the Fraser Institute have looked at our GDP per capita. And if it were not for massive immigration numbers, we would be in a recession. Because while our GDP is going up, our GDP per capita is going down.
Brian, south of the border, the Americans had their second major election event. This comes just 8 short days after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Joe Biden stepped down as the nominee for the Democrats. Kamala Harris right now is in the lead as the next nominee here. But Brian, apparently it doesn't matter who the candidate is. Protectionist policies will be put in place, which will really hurt Canada.
And this is the new reality that we have to align with. A lot of what we're hearing out of Ottawa from the political class and the commentators is, oh, we have to prepare for a second Trump presidency. And they make it sound like it's the looming apocalypse. I think the bigger concern is, regardless of which party wins, we are getting protectionism. And so you can drop Biden for Kamala Harris, and look, the party has made it clear that they're rigging the system. The party of democracy has made it clear that they are rigging the system to ensure that Harris is the nominee. And so Biden was more protectionist than Trump. Trump was more protectionist than Obama. Harris is no different than Biden. So what our elected officials in Ottawa, our diplomats in Washington, our bureaucrats in both places have to come to grips with is we are no longer in an era of free trade. Now, this is very important for our producers of all kinds, whether we're talking about aluminum, steel, autos, luxury goods like boats made in places like Kelowna, British Columbia. We're talking about steel up in Edmonton. We're talking about beef in Alberta or pork in Quebec. All of these have been targeted. The softwood lumber in British Columbia, in particular, has been targeted. All of these things are at risk, and these are part of our economic livelihood. Biden has been playing footsies, as we've discussed before, with what is in effect a country of origin labeling requirement for beef and pork by another name. Well, what would that mean? The integrated beef industry of North America would be injured, and it would especially hurt Alberta beef producers. It would hurt pork producers in Quebec and Ontario. Our officials are not aligned for that. They're running around like chickens with their heads cut off, talking about what do we do if Trump wins? Doesn't matter. Our main concern has to be market access and economics. And at this point, both of them are protectionist parties. The Democrats have long been, and the Republicans have now joined them. And we saw that with some of the comments made by J.D. Vance, Trump's vice presidential pick, during the Republican National Convention. Nobody likes NAFTA anymore. Nobody wants to trade anymore. They want to shut the borders.
But Brian, both Kamala Harris, who I believe went to high school here in Canada, and J.D. Vance, Trump's running mate, they both have those Canadian connections. Won't that help us?
Hopefully, but hope's not a plan. J.D. Vance is from Ohio. That's a border state, effectively. It's across Lake Erie from Canada. It's also a major trading partner with Canada, Ontario in particular. And Vance's one of his best friends is Jamil Jovani, a former colleague of mine here at the Toronto Sun, and who's currently an MP in Pierre Poilievre's government. So there's that connection. And you're right, Kamala Harris went to high school in Montreal. She graduated from Westmount High School, an English-speaking high school in La Belle Provence, that only gets you so far. They have both made it clear neither one of them likes NAFTA. They're both have protectionist leanings, and so we need to find a way to constantly be on guard, not just for Donald Trump, which is what the bureaucrats and the Trudeau government seem to be worried about, but for all of them. So we need to be constantly on a Team Canada focus. The federal government working with the provinces. I know Alberta has a great trade office down in Washington, housed inside the embassy. Ontario's got to beef up its trade office. We've got to be constantly, all levels of government, regardless of stripe, going down to Washington and making the case in person with people in Congress, be it House of Representatives or the Senate. Here's why trade is important. Here's how much business you do with this province, with that province, with the whole of Canada. Here's how many jobs in your state would be impacted if you shuttered the border. Those are the things we need to be doing, not just running around screaming, oh my goodness, Donald Trump could win again.
Our country's Foreign Affairs Minister, Mélanie Joly, made a surprise visit to China. So, Brian, what was the purpose of her visit?
Apparently, she was over in Korea and the Chinese heard about it and invited her over. Depending on who you read, it was either a great visit or a comeuppance, with the Chinese calling Canada on the carpet. And some odd comments that Mélanie Joly made in an interview with the Globe and Mail, where she said, "Oh, look, it's not the government of Canada that has issues with China; it's the perceptions of people." Oh, really? So the government of Canada doesn't have an issue with China interfering in our democracy. The government of Canada doesn't have an issue with China kidnapping two of our citizens, engaging in trade wars. You want to talk about protectionism? Wasn't that long ago that they were blocking shipments of canola, saying that it was inferior to their rapeseed, which they were using for cooking oil. They were claiming there were all kinds of varmints or mold in it and various things. None of it true, but this is what China does. And the Trudeau government, even after everything we've been through, continues to want to suck up to the dictatorship in Beijing. It's really unbecoming of Mélanie Joly and the Prime Minister and of a country that wants to be taken seriously on the international stage.
A Canadian who attempted a stabbing attack in Israel was killed by police, Brian. Now, what do we know about this individual and what was their motivation behind this attack?
We know very little. We know that it was a Canadian traveling on a Canadian passport. Full name is, I believe, Adam Zachariah Karashi. I've seen various forms, whether Zach or Adam come first. We don't know too much about the person. We know that they flew into Israel. They rented a car. They paid for it in advance, I'm told, and rented it for 2 weeks, paid for it in advance, went to a small community near the Gaza border, got out with a knife and started screaming that there's a genocide and free Palestine. And as he was rushing towards people with a knife, was shot and killed by Israeli forces. So, to me, we're exporting terrorism now. I'm sure there are going to be some people that feel sorry or say Canada should speak up against Israel killing one of our citizens. I don't know what we would say. One of our citizens went to Israel, jumped out at civilians with a knife trying to kill them at a security checkpoint. If you do that in just about any country in the world, you are going to be killed. And that's what happened here. So, we'll be looking for more information. There are a few people with that name that I found trying to determine exactly who this is. Not as easy as you may think.
Brian, before we let you go, let's chit-chat a bit more about the polls. Last time we chatted, the Tories were up by close to 20 points over the Liberals, and there was more talk about Trudeau potentially stepping aside and a successor maybe helping the Liberal Party to rebuild heading into next year's election. What's the latest? What are you hearing?
The latest is Justin Trudeau's on vacation, and he's going to be on vacation for a couple of weeks. He's out in Tofino, walking in the sand. Is that the same as walking in the snow? I don't know. Maybe it is for him. He's a big surfer, loves that coast of British Columbia. Perhaps he takes time with his kids over the next couple of weeks and says, you know what, I'd rather be doing this than being prime minister. I still don't think that's going to happen. The Conservatives are well ahead. The Trudeau Liberals are, to a degree, hoping that Donald Trump wins the presidency in November, and then they can campaign on fear, which they've been trying to do for the last year, by the way. trying to link Pierre Poilievre and Donald Trump and trying to make that out to be the big scary man and, you should be afraid. I think most Canadians see through that. Also, the last poll that I saw that asked Canadians about Donald Trump, I believe it was 33% said they would vote for Donald Trump. And at that point, it was mid-20s for Justin Trudeau. So Donald Trump now more popular than Justin Trudeau in Canada. It's just like it's a bizarre time in American politics. It remains a bizarre time here. Trudeau hasn't faced the same pressure as Biden to step down. The donations have never been great for the Liberals. They're not great right now, but they haven't changed dramatically. He hasn't had caucus members showing up and saying, you've got to step down. He hasn't had party brass saying, you got to leave, boss. Until that starts happening, he's going to hang in there just like Joe Biden wanted until the party threw him out.
Sun political columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining us today from Toronto.
Thank you, Hal.